Next on the news, showing signs of improvement. The Vatican says Pope Francis is responding to treatment in Rome after dealing with a respiratory infection. Holding the fort down, we'll find out who's running the Vatican as the pontiff recovers. An outcry of support from the White House to the Diocese of Brooklyn. Leaders reach out to rally for Pope Francis. Expressing faith through music, the priest that's tuning up for a concert going into Holy Week. I'm Christine Persichetti. Current News starts right now. You're looking at Pope Francis's hospital room, where tonight doctors say he's feeling better, but prayers for the Pope keep pouring in. The world waits with bated breath on the pontiff's prognosis after he was diagnosed with a respiratory infection. Fortunately, he is improving, and as Delia Gallagher tells us from Rome, the Vatican is keeping people up to date.
More details Thursday evening from the Vatican on the Pope's health. They say he has bronchitis and is receiving antibiotics intravenously. He is responding well. They say there is a clear improvement in his situation. Should that continue to progress, they say he will be released in the coming days. This is added to what the Vatican told us earlier this morning, that the Pope rested well overnight. He had breakfast this morning. He was able to read the newspapers and even do a bit of work. So very reassuring updates from the Vatican on Thursday, certainly considering the news from Wednesday afternoon that the Pope had been having difficulty breathing in the past few days. Of course, Francis is 86 years old. He has a certain vulnerability to respiratory issues because when he was 21, part of his lung was removed because of respiratory illness. This is a busy week coming up starting on Sunday, Palm Sunday. It starts off the Easter week celebrations. Pope Francis would normally preside at those celebrations. We'll have to see how he progresses in these next few days here at the hospital to see if he'll be able to participate. Delia Gallagher, Rome.
As Delia mentioned, part of the Pope's lung was removed decades ago when he was suffering from severe pneumonia. There was a lot of talk about that when he was first elected the Holy Father. Since then, other health concerns have plagued Francis. Let's take a look now at what we know of his more recent medical history. Francis has suffered from sciatica, or a pain which runs down the legs from the lower back, for some time now. He also has had diverticulitis. That's when pouches in the lining of the colon or intestine have become inflamed or infected. In July of 2021, the Pope actually underwent colon surgery to treat diverticulitis, removing part of his colon. And finally, starting early last year, the Holy Father has been having knee problems, something he previously blamed on an inflamed ligament. That pain has led the Pope to cancel some events and trips as doctors ordered him to rest. Since then, we've all seen Francis walking with assistance or using a wheelchair. Joining us now to talk more about the Pope's health and what's happening at the Vatican when he's not around is John Allen, the editor of Crux. Hi, John.
Hey, Christine.
So, John, we just ran down the Pope's medical history. Given all that, how concerned should we be right now?
Well, I think that the soundbite answer to that is not very. I think that is to say, look, anytime you've got somebody who is 86 years old who has to go in the hospital because of breathing difficulties, you should be worried. Now, that said, there is absolutely no indication that the Pope's condition is life-threatening. He continues to be alert and engaged in his own treatment. He does not have to undergo surgery. He's not going to have to undergo general anesthesia. So, this is a little bit of needed R&R and TLC for the Pope. No indication, Christine, that we're on a death watch.
Yeah, he's even working in the hospital from what I've read. Now, doctors are doing everything they can to help him, which means they won't risk him leaving early. So who fills in at the Vatican while the Holy Father is recovering?
Well, short answer to that question is no one. In the Catholic system, there is no vice pope. There is no number two that can step up and take over executive responsibilities. But the good news here is, as Pope Francis has reminded us, you don't need legs to govern the church. You just need a brain. His brain, by all accounts, continues to function admirably. So, whatever executive decisions need to be made, he can make them from the Gemelli. Let's remember, John Paul II used to do this all the time. John Paul II spent enough time at the Gemelli Hospital over the course of his papacy. They actually called it the Third Vatican, after the real Vatican in Castel Gandolfo, where he spent his summers. In terms of a routine administration, the normal people are in charge of the normal things. Cardinal Pietro Parolin is running the diplomatic apparatus. Cardinal Arthur Roach is running the liturgical office, and so on. Big picture decisions still being made by the Pope, just not from the Casa Santa Marta, but from his room at the Gemelli.
All right, and he has a busy itinerary ahead of him, travel plans, presiding over Holy Week. But do you think he'll be able to be there? Palm Sunday is this weekend.
Yeah, I don't know about Palm Sunday. I mean, they are saying that he might get out of the hospital on Saturday, but even if he did, my guess would be doctors would still recommend that he take it easy for a while. It may well be that somebody else leads the Palm Sunday liturgy. I would be more surprised if, at least beginning on Holy Thursday, the Pope doesn't begin at least to appear. I mean, the Vatican has this formula where he can preside at a liturgy, but somebody else actually celebrates in terms of standing at the altar and doing the Eucharistic prayers. We may see some of that.
Right. And now back in 2021, after the Pope had intestinal surgery, he prayed the Angelus from the balcony of Gemelli Hospital. Is there a chance we might see something like that again?
Well, for sure, if the Pope is still in the Gemelli on Palm Sunday, I would bet my bottom dollar that he will come to the window, may well, in fact, do the traditional Angelus at noon from the Gemelli. On the other hand, if the Pope is able to get out before that, he may not want to overproduce this stay and may be anxious to get back to business in the Vatican. We will see.
All right, that's right. We'll see. John Allen, editor of Crux, thanks so much for being here.
Of course.
The Holy Father's diagnosis leaves many wondering what this means for the Pope medically. Earlier, I spoke with Dr. Robert Tabali from the Catholic Medical Association about what a respiratory infection could mean for the 86-year-old, as well as, given the Vatican's history of being tight-lipped on the Pope's health issues, could there be more going on than what we're being told?
He has advanced risk factors, and we really don't know his cardiac status. So he could have a number of different things going on, but his risks actually would be fairly high at his age. I do believe it could be more than what we're told. The Pope's gained a lot of weight over the past year. From a medical perspective, you'd have to think if he's on some type of therapy for another condition, using steroids or something like that. He's gained quite a bit of weight since he had that abdominal surgery in 2021. Similarly, when Pope John Paul was ill, none of us realized that he had had a tracheostomy placed, a tube to help him breathe in the neck, before he passed away during his last hospitalization. So the Vatican is going to normally be quite tight-lipped on the Pope's accurate medical status, and they don't want to worry people, but the Pope is deserving of our thoughts and prayers for both his comfort and his recovery at this time.
According to a statement from the Vatican, the Pope has been given an antibiotic for his bronchitis. Dr. Tabali predicted he would be prescribed this for his respiratory infection. He also said should the Pope have fluid in his lungs, he'll be on water pills. And if he has fluid buildup, it might be drained or watched for further treatment. Finally, he said the Pope should feel better within the next few days. And prayers for the Pope are coming in from every corner, from Washington to Brooklyn. Religious and secular leaders are extending their well wishes for the Holy Father. Current News' Jessica Easthope has more on how they want to help Pope Francis from afar.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
Prayers for Pope Francis's health are in no short supply. His hospitalization is getting the attention of leaders across the country who hope for a speedy recovery ahead of Holy Week, including President Joe Biden, who called Pope Francis Christ-like at the White House while celebrating Greek Independence Day.
The two most Christ-like figures I've ever met were His All Holiness and the Pope. And the Pope is ill now, so say an extra prayer for him.
On behalf of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, President Archbishop Timothy Broglio released a statement on their prayers for the Holy Father and for how Catholics all over the country should respond, saying, quote, "As Pope Francis recovers in the hospital from a respiratory infection, we pray intensely for our Holy Father. On behalf of my brother bishops, I invite all the faithful to pause, if possible, before the Blessed Sacrament and pray for his speedy recovery. May our dear shepherd and all those in need of healing experience the comfort of Christ."
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
And in the Diocese of Brooklyn, Bishop Robert Brennan is asking Catholics to get back to the roots of their faith.
Exactly what we do every time we, as Catholics, hear that someone is ill. We pray.
Bishop Brennan used the Diocese of Brooklyn's Lenten pilgrimage as a way to pray for Pope Francis. On Wednesday, he prayed the rosary with more than 300 people at Corpus Christi Parish in Woodside, Queens.
Our intention was for the health of the Holy Father and for his healing.
And on Thursday, Bishop Brennan also prayed for the Holy Father while celebrating Mass at Immaculate Conception Parish in Astoria. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. Music to your ears. The musically inclined priest preparing for a faith-based concert. A life-saving drug that may help curb the opioid epidemic is now more accessible. Plus, over 100 years young, the woman who spent more than a century tickling the ivories, oftentimes at church. The Stations of the Cross played out the joys and sorrow of the Lenten season felt through song. That music you just heard is part of an oratorio about Mary at the foot of the cross during Christ's crucifixion. It's just one of the pieces of music set to be played at a concert on Friday at St. Francis of Paola Church in Williamsburg. The bass player in that orchestra is the pastor of the church, Father Tom Vassalotti. Currents News' Jessica Easthope sat down with him and some other musicians ahead of the show and Holy Week.
Strings, keys, voices. Each part adds to a collective sound. In this case, it's the sound of a mother's unconditional love. It's called Stabat Mater, a Christian hymn to Mary, depicting her suffering at the foot of the cross during Jesus' crucifixion.
The Marian devotion of it makes it more relatable, and also to combine it with the praying of the Stations of the Cross will be very meaningful, I think.
Through these great geniuses who wrote this music, you're being carried into some deeper place.
Providing the deepest pitch in the orchestra is Father Tom Vassalotti on the bass. Father Tom is the pastor of Divine Mercy Parish, which includes St. Francis Paola Church in Williamsburg. He's also a classically trained musician and Juilliard graduate.
God gives you gifts, and this guy has been in my life for a long time, and music has been a lot, part of my, and it still is.
Father Tom and fellow Juilliard grad violinist Eric Grossman put this group together. On Friday, they'll perform this music at the church while parishioners pray the Stations of the Cross.
Everything enhances what really needs to be communicated and makes it more vivid and deeper.
Father Tom's love for music started long before he devoted his life to God. Now, it's part of that devotion. Each press, pluck, and note is intentional and evokes emotion.
It's a place where people, through history, have brought forth the very best of themselves in terms of their competence and their art. It's a wonderful lesson for all of us to give the very best of what you have.
This is the best of who Father Tom is. In Williamsburg, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
You can see Father Tom and the rest of the orchestra in their Stations of the Cross interactive concert on Friday, March 31st at 7 p.m. at St. Francis of Paola Church. The address there is 219 Concelia Street in Williamsburg. A life-saving drug has been approved by the FDA for over-the-counter use. By late summer, you'll be able to get Narcan at supermarkets, drugstores, and gas stations. The nasal spray version of naloxone blocks the effects opioids have on the nervous system, reversing fatal overdoses. The CDC says opioids are currently the main cause of drug overdose deaths. Even before the FDA's action, pharmacies could sell naloxone without a prescription because officials in every state have allowed it. So once the drug becomes available, how do you use it to save a life? Mandy Gaither speaks to a doctor about how to administer the opioid antidote.
It's a crisis in America. The CDC says deaths from opioid overdoses rose more than 17% in just 1 year, from about 69,000 in 2020 to more than 81,000 in 2021. But now, for the first time ever, the Food and Drug Administration has approved an opioid overdose antidote for over-the-counter use.
If you come across a person who is unconscious or it appears that they might not be breathing and you have reason to suspect that it's related to an overdose, you can save a life with Narcan.
The nasal spray will come in 2 4-milligram doses in case the person overdosing doesn't respond to the first dose. It will be sold in places like drugstores, convenience stores, grocery stores, gas stations, and online. Addiction psychiatrist Trent Hall with the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center says administering Narcan is simple.
Step 1, check. Wake up. Step 2, give first dose of Narcan. Step 3, call 911. Step 4, watch and give more every 2 to 3 minutes until the person wakes up. It's possible for a person to experience another overdose, even without taking more opioids. And so staying with them until the ambulance arrives gives them the best possible chance of survival.
Nearly every state in the U.S. allows pharmacists or other qualified organizations to provide Narcan without a personal prescription to those at risk of an overdose. But making it available over the counter may make it easier for people to access this opioid antidote. I'm Mandy Gaither.
Dr. Hall also said giving Narcan to someone not having an overdose is not harmful, and the product is safe to give to anyone, including children and babies. Another train derailment, this time in Minnesota. Crews are working to clean up the mess, but after a number of recent crashes, the safety of the nation's railways comes into question. Chris Wynn has more.
Rail cars bursting into flames early Thursday morning when a BNSF railway train hauling ethanol and mixed freight, including corn syrup, derailed in Raymond, Minnesota, forcing nearby residents to evacuate for several hours.
We take full accountability for it, and we'll continue to be here until this is cleaned up.
Ethanol is a highly flammable chemical. The effects of exposure can include coughing, dizziness, and unconsciousness. But so far, officials say there have been no injuries or reports of toxic exposure.
Safety of the community is our utmost priority.
This comes nearly 2 months after the February derailment of a Norfolk Southern train carrying hazardous chemicals in East Palestine, Ohio, that sparked a days-long inferno. And it's just the latest in a string of recent incidents calling the safety of the nation's railways into question.
The reason that we're pushing so hard on railroad safety is to make sure there are fewer of these incidents. This happens more often than I think most Americans realize.
As the federal government launches investigations into the causes of the derailments, lawmakers on Capitol Hill are taking action.
The Rail Act makes important and pragmatic changes to the way our nation's rail industry operates, ensuring that our families, friends, and neighbors are kept safe.
A bipartisan group of Ohio representatives recently proposed legislation that includes provisions to enhance federal oversight of freight trains, increases funding for hazardous materials training for first responders, and increases penalties for rail safety violations. Chris Wynn, Currents News.
Meantime, that migrant center tragedy is now being investigated as a homicide. Mexican officials made the announcement during a news conference about the fire that killed 39 people near the border. They're accusing those in charge of failing to do anything to help.
None of the public servants nor the private security police officers did anything to open the door for the migrants who were inside with the fire. We will always act with transparency. We will not hide any facts, and we will not protect anyone. The investigation will be transparent to give justice to the people.
Prosecutors say they have identified 8 suspects, including federal and state agents. One migrant may also be investigated for starting the fire. Now let's take a look at some of the other stories making news right now. 9 U.S. service members are dead after 2 Army helicopters crashed in southwestern Kentucky. A military investigation is underway. Newly revealed documents show after Roe was overturned, U.S. Marshals were told not to arrest abortion protesters while protecting Supreme Court justices at their homes unless absolutely necessary. And Russia arrested a U.S. reporter on espionage charges, the first time something like that has happened since the Cold War. Still to come on Currents News. Tickling the ivories for nearly a century. We'll introduce you to the piano player who's 104 years young and has been active since the Roaring '20s. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Here's a unique train ride you probably haven't taken before. Retired Rhode Island firefighter and train enthusiast Ross Gross created an 18-cart train for people to ride. It travels a half-mile through nature. 1,200 people have taken a ride, and the fare $5 for adults and free for kids under 3. Looks like fun. She's 104 years old, and for almost 100 years, she's been playing the piano. Lucille Claridge started tickling the ivories in the Roaring '20s and played for her church for 42 years. Currents News' Andy Madison has her story.
Oh, thank you.
So what do you give somebody for their 104th birthday?
Oh, look at that.
Chocolate works. But after a century and change, I think what's most generous is the gift that Lucille Claridge keeps giving us. How sweet the sound. Lucille may not be in the same health condition that she always was, and due to balance issues, she can't really walk anymore. But when she sits down at the piano, nearly 100 years of music comes back to her fingertips.
Kids just always did what their folks told them to do. And what? It was different then.
Lucille has been playing piano since the Roaring '20s, when her mother strongly encouraged her to start taking lessons.
This one is my mother when she was 21 years old.
And in turn, she did the same with her daughter, Billy.
Music it's in her soul. You know, it's just in her, and I've heard it my whole life.
And when her late husband, Wally, passed away in 1996...
He's the greatest dad any kid ever had, huh?
That's right.
Lucille made sure to keep playing every week at their church in Littleton, where up until the pandemic, Lucille played the organ for 42 years.
But how happy do you feel when you start playing piano again? How happy does it make you?
Oh, I'm glad glad that my fingers work.
She's right. Lucille has a lot to be grateful for. And as you saw earlier,
happy birthday to you.
People have been bringing her presents all week long for the big 104. And keep in mind, at her 100th birthday party, 600 people showed up, and she's still making new friends. And while there are plenty of friends and family that she misses now,
this is our house.
When she sits at the piano, she remembers what matters most.
My mother had me take piano lessons. And I didn't always like to practice, but...
You glad you did?
I'm glad I did, and I'm glad she had me take lessons.
Andy Madison, Currents News.
So talented. All right, wondering what tips Lucille has for living a long life. She says, eat healthy, exercise, and listen to your parents. Gonna have to show my kids that one. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.